We walk through our daily lives with a quiet assumption. We are in control. We believe our choices are our own, born from our conscious thoughts and our unique personal histories. But that sense of control vanishes the second we step into a massive crowd. Inside a mob, the normal rules of behavior evaporate. A perfectly polite, rational individual suddenly descends to a primitive level of morality and intellect, acting in ways they never would on their own. In this moment, individual identity dissolves into a singular, unpredictable force. These men merge into a collective unit, personal values submerged in the group objective. When we try to explain this kind of terrifying behavioral shift, our immediate instinct is to look at the individual. We search for some childhood trauma or personal grudge to make sense of the violence. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung argued that this personal approach completely misses the mark. As this diagram shows, a personal complex, localized to a single man's life, cannot explain a shift that grips millions across a continent. The scale of a mass movement is simply too large to be generated by individual neuroses. Because personal history cannot logically account for millions of people suddenly acting with one aggressive mind, there has to be an entirely different, unseen operating system running in the background of human consciousness. Jung called the shallow layer of our mind the personal unconscious. It is strictly tied to your everyday life and individual experiences. Think of it as a localized storage facility. It holds your forgotten memories, your quirks, and the specific personal complexes you've developed over the years. It also has a darker corner. This is where we stash our uncomfortable, antisocial tendencies, the impulses Jung referred to as the statistical criminal. We intentionally repress these urges to function in polite society. Sigmund Freud's model of psychoanalysis spent most of its time investigating this specific, repressed layer. Freud's search largely ended at the personal. While this personal layer does dictate your daily routines, it has a rigid floor, and under enough external pressure, that floor cracks. Treating the human mind as a purely personal container leaves us completely blind and defenseless to the deeper forces that actually trigger mass panic. When a massive external event or historical shock occurs, a trapdoor swings open and the floor of the personal unconscious drops out. We see this with ancient environmental triggers. A sudden celestial event, like the lunar eclipse captured here, historically bypassed individual reason entirely, triggering instant, uncontrollable panic across populations. What lies beneath that trapdoor is an unmapped, impersonal ocean within the mind, the collective unconscious. This cross-section shows the true architecture of the psyche. At the top is the tiny tip of consciousness. Below is the narrow band of the personal unconscious, but underneath sits a massive, deep root structure inherited across the entire human species. Down in this deep layer, the mind is populated by archetypes, ancient, universal behavioral blueprints. When a crowd erupts, these impersonal forces rush upward, fracturing the personal layer and entirely consuming conscious reason. Inside a crowd, the individual loses the ability to choose their actions, falling under the possession of deep, inherited instincts. This dual-layer structure refutes the idea that the mind is an isolated, rational bubble. The conscious ego is little more than a tiny, fragile island, sitting alone on top of an unfathomably vast and churning ocean. Jung drew a stark conclusion. Modern humanity is essentially living on top of a dormant volcano, completely oblivious to the pressure building beneath our feet. Ancient cultures survived by taking these deep-seated psychological forces seriously, mapping them as gods and demons. They used complex geometric mandalas, like this one, to visualize and organize the overwhelming chaos of the deep psyche. Today, we assume we are strictly rational beings. We look at those ancient maps and dismiss them as superstition. But that specific hubris is exactly what leaves us entirely defenseless when the dormant volcano beneath our feet actually erupts. True self-awareness requires accepting that the primitive, violent impulses of our ancestors remain active, hiding just millimeters below our everyday thoughts.